Good evening. Welcome to California State University Bakersfield and to the Doré Theater for an evening of entertainment and education. We're delighted that you're here. We have a panel of local officials and community leaders who are going to discuss building healthy communities, which is an initiative, I should say, of Cal Endowment here in South Kern. And it will be moderated by Gerald Cantu from Bakersfield College. So following this panel at about 7:30, we will start the play In and Out of Shadows. So the play was always to start at 7:30, and originally the panel was going to go later, but that seemed rather late, so that's starting now. So if there's any confusion, that's how that happened, okay? But again, welcome. I hope you'll learn a lot from the discussion here. And let me turn it over now to Gerald and thank him for leading us.
Thanks, Miriam. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for coming today. And we'll try to make this as fun as possible for you. I know everybody came here to see the play, and you will get an opportunity to see that in a half hour. But anyways, Miriam mentioned that Building Health Communities organized this event or supported it at least, and I'm just going to explain a little bit more about Building Healthy Communities. It's an initiative of the California Endowment, and they have 14 zones throughout California where they, which have been targeted for systemic change. And what they do is they bring together a variety of organizations to work around a common agenda, and then the Building Healthy Communities serves as a backbone organization. And so what I have here are our panelists who are part of the BHC initiative. And to my left here is Josh Stetter, and Josh is a Central Valley Field organizer for California Partnership. That's a statewide coalition of community-based groups. And they organize and advocate policies and programs that work to reduce poverty. He became involved in local politics as a student here at CSUB through a club which is called United Now for Immigrant Rights, and he was the president in his last year here. Jose Corolla, to his left, is a man of many hats, and in addition to being the Youth Recreation Projects Coordinator with the Boys and Girls Club of Kern County, he's also a Harvard City Councilman. And at 19, he was the only elected official ever to get voted into office here in Kern County in Harvard. And he was only 19 at that time. So Paula is a co-founder of LEAD, the student club that I mentioned. She also sits on the board of the College Dream Fund, and she's a union organizer currently with the SEIU Local 521. That's the Service Employers International Union. We might have another panelist come at some point, but when he does come, I will introduce him then. So today, this play is actually a dramatization of the experiences of dreamers, and I'm going to allow Paula to go ahead and get us started here by explaining what the Dreamers movement is all about from her perspective.
Thank you, Gerald. So I will say that it's a lot easier to have a panel discussion after you've seen the play. You can kind of see what themes we can pull out and identify with. So I'll try to provide as much context as possible without giving any of it away, right? So for me, watching the play, I watched it yesterday, my initial reaction was that plays are great because they're able to pull us out of our heads. A lot of us think a lot about like the statistics and how immigration reform is the right thing to do because of the economy or the moral kind of argument that we have. But I think the play did a really wonderful job just pulling me out of that kind of policy-oriented framework that I think about often into my heart again, which is that at the end of the day, the political issues of our day are really human issues, and we're dealing with real people. And so what you'll see is with the characters is they're going to really personalize the issue, not just through Marvin High who was undocumented, because that's the story of where I come from. And to really deal with not only being a teenager, which is hard in itself, but dealing with feeling very isolated because I was undocumented. Being undocumented, I was taught not to share my experience, my status with others because of fear of deportation. And so I grew up, came to this country when I was 4 years old, and all through high school really grew up afraid. And this play really put me back 10 years ago, which, at that time in my life, more than 10 years, but okay, we'll round down. And so, for me, I think it was a good way to reflect, because yesterday at the panel that we had, we were talking to a lot of high school students, and a lot of them might have not known who their governor is, or their board of supervisor member, or their council member, and I was in their shoes 10 plus years ago, and at the same time, have grown tremendously since then, because I did become politically involved, because I was undocumented, and I back then contacted an organization in LA because I couldn't find any support system here in Kern County for undocumented students, and started gathering petitions for, back then it wasn't Kevin McCarthy, but Bill Thomas, who was in office, so that we could ask him to support immigration reform. And through then, I have done everything from petitions to 10-day fasts to going to Florida, Washington, D.C. to work on different campaigns in order to get immigration reform. But the most important thing is that learning and sharing the stories of other local undocumented students, because when it was just me doing this work, it felt very lonely and very isolated. But once we started creating a group, for example, at Bakersfield College, we started a group here on campus. We started United Now for Immigrant Rights in 2010. Then when you start finding that collective voice, then you're not alone anymore, and you start having that power in numbers. And then something beautiful happened from 2006 to the present, which is the Dreamer movement was born. For those of you that don't know what a dreamer is, it's an undocumented young person who grew up in this country, is part of this country. They just might not have, we don't have a pathway to citizenship, and so we're constantly fighting for that. And so for me, the Dreamer movement in Kern County is alive, but of course, we still need to really reinvigorate it and make sure that it's coming from the student perspective, right? So it was really nice to see that UNID, the club, is doing outreach outside of their table, because while I might have more than a full-time job now that I'm a union organizer, it's nice to know that someone else will carry that forward.
Thank you, Paula. I'm gonna move on to Josh next. And Josh, you've been involved here. You were president of UNID here, so you were, you've been intimately involved in the Dreamer movement here in Kern County. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Dreamer movement here in Kern County looks like?
Sure. I think the Dreamer movement here in Kern County has changed pretty drastically over the last couple of years. In 2013, we were fighting for comprehensive immigration reform. Nowadays, I think, as you'll see within the play, a lot of folks are experiencing this kind of fear of deportation. And that's really what we're fighting against, fighting against the separation of families, specifically because we, when comprehensive immigration reform didn't pass, and it, whatever political sort of things were at play and whatever really happened, we began to realize that the politician was really going to give us what we wanted at that time at that federal level, without us advocating for ourselves. And so me personally, I'm not undocumented, but I come from a family that is referred to commonly as a mixed status family, where I happen to be the one that benefits from citizenship, whereas the majority of my family doesn't. And so for me, the threat of that, and really what we've been organizing around in Kern County and various parts of the Central Valley, really in California, is against that, right? So we are not experiencing relief now. I guess people argue when we will experience more formalized relief at the federal level. So right now we're fighting to keep our families together, we're fighting to get rights, and that's really what the Dreamer movement looks like nowadays, and especially in Kern County. We're really trying to fight for healthcare, fight for families to stay together, fight for really visibility, and getting folks to get empowered and realize that they need to kind of fight for that change that they want to see.
Thanks, Josh. Jose, you've been an elected official here in Kern County for the past 3 years, since 2012, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Can you give us kind of an account of the evolution of the fight for immigration reform and the Dreamer movement here in Kern County?
Yes. When I first was elected, a few months into office, it was a big push of immigration reform, right? It was the 2012 election. President Obama won Latino vote by over 70%. Mitt Romney obviously was not as fortunate to get that percentage, and then the whole discussion on both sides of the aisle was we have to have immigration reform. We have to solve this problem. And so the Senate got to work right away. So the first thing, one of the first things that we did was we passed a resolution unanimously, and we sent the letter or the resolution to Speaker Boehner, to a majority leader of the Senate, and to our congressman, asking them to support comprehensive immigration reform. Now, a resolution is just a piece of paper, but it's important because it says leaders of an entire city are coming together to express their support behind this issue, right? So that's something that we did early 2013, and several cities across not only the valley, but across the country did that. And because of that effort, because of the efforts of a lot of activists and a lot of dreamers, the actions that they did, there was a bill that was passed by the Senate. I believe there was Senate Resolution 744, and it was passed with 68 votes. And if anybody knows anything about how the Senate works, 68 votes out of 100 is pretty difficult to get. So it was a pretty bipartisan. Both parties, both Democrat and Republicans, came together to support it. And then it went over to the House in the summer, and it pretty much died out. Not because a majority of people in the House or representatives in the House did want immigration reform, but because the leadership at the time, they made the decision that we are not going to bring forward immigration reform to the full House vote unless a majority of the majority, which at the time was a majority of the Republicans, which in reality is a minority, supports it, right? So unless a majority of the Republicans supported the bill, then they weren't going to put it up to the vote. And so that was very disappointing. But what you saw that August, it was called, I believe, Action August, because that's when representatives come home to their district, they take about a month off from Congress, and they visit their constituents. You saw several actions outside of Congressman Valadale's office, Congressman McCarthy's office, asking for their support for immigration reform. You had families, you had brothers and sisters, you had businesses coming together in support of this movement. And so since then, nothing really materialized. So in 2014, President Obama, after the election, tried to implement DACA, which is the extension of DACA for some of the parents, and expand the DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which was passed in 2012, or which was implemented by the president in 2012, much to the benefit, or much to the efforts of the Dreamer movement. And so since then, DACA has been, settled in court, has been making its way through the courts. Opponents have filed lawsuits, and right now it's up in the air. We're hoping that it'll move forward, but the main goal, it needs to be a comprehensive immigration reform. So that's where it's at right now. We'll see after this presidential election next year what materializes in terms of moving for immigration reform.
Thank you, Jose. I did want to mention that I am of the opinion, I'm out of this, and I do believe that we will eventually get comprehensive immigration reform, not this election cycle, unfortunately, but hopefully the political landscape will change. And when we, on the play on Friday, yesterday, right, there was the announcement that John Boehner, who was the person who decided not to bring the vote up in the House after the Senate passed it on a bipartisan vote, he resigned. And he resigned because the Pope was here. I always wait, I mean, this kind of, figured it was populist. He made the decision to resign because, he was really affected by the Pope's visit. But the Pope, I want to mention, made some beautiful remarks on immigration and immigrants. Immigrants he characterized as people who, and we are all immigrants, he said, and we come here, to better our lives. And so he really kind of called on our society, to have compassion. And so, here's an aside, and I'm going to pass this on to Paula in just a second, but Marco Rubio was actually the person who voted, he was part of the Gang of Eight, who voted for comprehensive immigration reform in the Senate in 2013, and then he kind of backtracked on that. And he's against the pathway to citizenship currently. And when the Pope made his remarks on immigration, he cried. So hopefully you'll have a change of heart, but at the moment, then come out, he's still against the pathway to citizenship, which he voted for in 2013. So Jose mentioned the political happenings in 2013. In June of 2013, we had the vote in the Senate, and we were very near passing comprehensive immigration reform, and unfortunately it didn't pass. But Paul, if you think back at that time, how did it feel from your point of view? Being so close, to getting comprehensive immigration reform, and then, having the rug swept up from under our feet.
He wants me to cry before the play. Just kidding. So actually, that was devastating as far as I feel like we really organized a strong campaign in order to get support from unlikely places, not just our usual allies, but as well as law enforcement and evangelicals, Catholic, just all kinds of cross-sector collaboration. And so everyone, I think, polls that were out there say that this is something that the American people overwhelmingly want on both sides of the aisle. So again, going back to that statistics kind of being in our head kind of thing, then it just made a lot of sense. It was heartbreaking to not see it pass. However, I must say I wasn't surprised given what the gridlock in Washington was. So I don't think I was as devastated on a personal level, just because at the end of the day, I had braced myself for something like this. However, in 2010, when we didn't get the DREAM Act, and I was a student here, it shattered me to the point where I think it really sent me into a real depression, because one, I was younger and still much more optimistic in seeing things done. And I think that really paralyzed the Dreamer movement for about a year, until we came back and started shutting down President Obama's campaign offices so that he could do something to move the issue forward, and that's how we got deferred action. And for those of you that aren't familiar with deferred action, it's a program that allows young people that came to this country after going through a rigorous process to get a social security number, a work permit, and here in California, a driver's license, and that's how I'm currently able to work. So I think that in every time that there's an obstacle ahead of us, there's also great opportunity to remove that obstacle. And so I think that not passing it in 2013 is only going to make us stronger for the next time that there's an opportunity for this to pass. And I'm probably speaking too long, but in 2007, after a 10-day fast that we did for immigration reform, where we ended up in Pelosi district in San Francisco, we watched immigration reform fail then as well. And a very smart immigration lawyer who works at the national level, I think he was trying to comfort me, but he said, don't worry, we'll have something by 2017. And so that was in 2007, I was 21, so, that seemed like 2017 could never come, but it looks like it's almost 2017, so.
Thank you, Paula. As you can see on the buttons of the three panelists here, they have a button which says hashtag health for all. And Building Healthy Communities is actually using this occasion to launch this campaign. They've got started already, but we're kind of proceeding along with the campaign. And one of the things that citizenship provides persons is the ability to reap benefits of the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act was passed in 2010, and it led our nation on a trajectory towards universal health coverage. Not quite universal, but near universal. It did so by various means. But I do want to mention that our undocumented population was left behind and not included in the ACA. And that's so now we're left with a large segment of our population that lacks health care coverage and whose options are limited, quite frankly. And so what Health for All, I'm going to allow Josh to explain this. I did want to give one striking statistic before passing on the mic here to Josh. In South Current, 81% of the native-born population has medical insurance. That's such a high figure because of the ACA. On the other hand, the undocumented population has only 49% of them have health insurance, and this leads to all kinds of problems for families and for the community. Josh, can you tell us what is Health for All? Why is it important, and why should people be paying attention?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of as I was mentioning earlier, when we realized that we weren't going to get comprehensive immigration reform, and then after ACA passed and it was said that we have universal coverage, provided you have the fancy 9-digit number, we really began to organize around the DREAM movement for the undocumented population. Really began to organize around that one of those aspects, right? That aspect of not being able to have access to healthcare. And if anyone has ever been uninsured or has ever had to face, surprise emergency or medical problems, they've really kind of begun to realize how difficult it can be if you don't have insurance, and how expensive it can really be to try to normalize anything. The medical system is really expensive, and I think the Health for All movement is centered around this idea that healthcare is a human right. And it's been a couple of years of a movement, but it really has focused around this idea that everybody should be provided healthcare regardless of immigration status. When we talk about sickness, when we talk about diseases, these things don't see ethnic borders, they don't see ethnic lines, they don't discriminate on that sort of level. And so why should people's ability to have coverage or access to that coverage, why should that ability to have access to that coverage be discriminatory on these bases? And really, when you begin to look at the stories of folks, and you really begin to see that a lot of people have to think about the price as opposed to their ability to get coverage or their health, really. The price over the pain. And this campaign took a little bit more of a personal and a little bit more of a local spin when after the May revise at the California level in 2015, which was the budget cycle, the governor gave $40 million for undocumented children to be covered as an entitlement under Medi-Cal. That really began to get us to ask the question, and a lot of counties around the state to ask themselves what happens to the undocumented parents. And tons of counties, for example, earlier this week, Contra Costa County took up an initiative to expand their Benefit Indigent program to cover everybody regardless of immigration status. A lot of different counties around the state have been doing similar things where they're trying to provide some sort of coverage to everybody regardless of immigration status. And the counties have become really the folks that have been leading a lot of this work. Right? We're not sure, we want this to happen at a state level, we want this to happen at a federal level, but while this isn't happening, folks still have to put band-aids on this so that we can, be healthy. We can have access to reliable healthcare, and that's really what the Kern County Health for All movement is beginning to kind of take. That's what it's beginning to materialize into as well. So trying to get our county board of supervisors to provide some sort of coverage regardless of immigration status.
Thanks, John. Jose, we have a couple minutes here. Why don't you close us out here and tell people how they can get involved in the Health for All campaign and comprehensive immigration reform, the movement for comprehensive immigration reform generally.
Yes, I just want to say that this is a very, very important issue, right? I mean, in terms of health for all and undocumented residents not having access to health care, which means primary care and preventative care, right? Being able to go to a doctor whenever they have a chest pain, whenever their leg hurts, whenever they have a headache, that may catch a illness, or that's a symptom for something much more serious and much more expensive to cover. People are dying early. People are dying because they're not having the access to health care that other people have the privilege to, right? And so I truly believe that this is a human right. Healthcare is a human right. And if it was, some criminals killing people, or if it was another nation killing our residents here in this country, we'd be outraged. But yet you don't see the outrage whenever people are dying and dying early and suffering because of lack of health care, right? And so, as Josh mentioned, the county level is the first step, I think, to providing that kind of health coverage for the undocumented. And it's because they have a mechanism where they have a public health department, right? And so, and they're local, and there's only 5 members of the board of supervisors that we have here in Kern County. Some counties have more, right? So, as was alluded to by Josh, Contra Costa, Fresno, Sacramento, they've started or have restarted some programs. Interesting though, with Fresno had it, they got rid of it. And then the community rose up, different actions, different protests. They talked to their board of supervisors, and then they brought it back. How? Well, it turns out that Fresno County owed about $5.5 million to the state of California. And so they worked with their assembly members, their state senators, and they got the state of California to forgive that debt, only if they use that money to go back into the program to cover undocumented people for health care. And so there's innovative ways to do that. So it starts with speaking up, talking to the people that represent us at the County Board of Supervisors, right? The chairman of the Board of Supervisors, his name is David Couch. He's a good guy, I know him personally. And then for 5th District, that represents Arvin Lamont Greenfield. It's my supervisor, that supervisor, Lisa Perez. I also know her, and she's a really nice person, right? So these are regular people that represent us, right? And they represent you. And when you're talking about a budget, when you're talking about new programs, as an elected official, you have to ask yourself, where are you going to get the money, right? And so a budget is a reflection of your priorities, right? Imagine having a top 10, a list of things to do. Let's say you have a list of 15 or 20 things to do, you can only pick 5 or 6. That's how governing works, that's how budgets work, right? And so being able to reflect that this is a priority for our community, that this is important, not only morally, not only as a public health aspect, because if these people aren't, given the health care that they need, and if they're becoming sick, then that puts the rest of us in danger, right? And there's also the economic aspect. It costs more to treat an illness down the road than it is to prevent it. And so making these decisions is the decision that the Board of Supervisors has to make. Is they have to decide how much money they're going to allocate to this program. And so I think the first step has to be having a discussion with the Board of Supervisors during the budget discussions, which begins in February, March, and April, and say, let's have a pilot program. There's about 66,000 approximate undocumented residents here in Kern County. In South Kern, 51% of them, only 51% of them don't have access to health care. right? So let's come up with a number, let's have a pilot program, and then see how it works, and let's expand it and make it work better. So that's what we can do, and you guys can get involved by finding out who your board supervisor or who your supervisor is, talking to them, going to a meeting, getting involved, making sure you vote for people that support this issue, and if you can't vote, make sure that you get other people to vote, right? Speaking up, that's the way to get things done. Today was the 50th anniversary, the celebration 50th anniversary of the Delano Great Boycott and the start of the farm worker movement, right? Ordinary people coming together, sparking a national conversation over farm worker rights. That's the type of thing that we need to do here to promote for Health for All, for hashtag Health for All. Right? So if you want to find out more information about how you can get involved, go on any social media site, put the hashtag health, the number 4 and all, and you'll find tons of information. Go online, tweet your representatives, and that's pretty much how you can get involved in that movement.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the panelists for their wisdom and experience and for coming down and sharing with this audience. And audience, we're going to close this panel up, and then I'm going to pass it over to Aaron now and enjoy the play. Thank you for your time.